Hi folks, Alec Anderson here. I just want to say something about Ronnie McKinnon. We all heard the sad news on Sunday that the legendary Rangers centre half Ronnie McKinnon has passed away at the age of 83. And I'm someone who, I was 2 years old when Ronnie McKinnon's Rangers career came to an end prematurely. It's a horror tackle he suffered in the second leg, that amazing second leg, chaotic, famous, infamous game against Sporting in Lisbon. An opponent basically just assaulted him. I've had the privilege of speaking to some of the players who played in that match, and they said it was just an all-out assault. Ronnie's leg was broken in a couple of places. 31 years old he was. This is November 1971. And his career could have gone on for another 3 or 4 years easily at Rangers. So accomplished was he as a defender. But I think for me, and probably for people of my age and even younger, the thing about Ronnie McKinnon is, having never seen him playing, despite the fact that I never watched him playing football in the flesh. I didn't see my first Rangers game until 1977. That's my first time at Ibrox, first time I watched Rangers in the flesh. And a lot of the players who played with Ronnie in that game in Lisbon were still playing for Rangers at that point in time. But he's still someone I grew up with. You grew up with the legend. You grew up knowing all about him. This is even Rangers fans that are born in the last few years will know about Ronnie McKinnon eventually when they get into the Rangers history. But it was something I was almost kind of born into. The legend that he helped build up. He's helped establish Rangers as the club they are and the club that I grew up loving. And I mean this literally, because I've got I don't know if you've got these playing for Rangers annuals. Now, this one I've got here was published in 1964. I wasn't born until 1969, but I've got a few of them in my shelves here, and a few of them have got Ronnie McKinnon featured quite heavily in them. They were passed down to me by relatives, like my auntie. That's my auntie's pennant. I've got. I don't know if she actually gave me it, or I just downright stole it. But my dad's youngest sister, she's 10 years younger than my dad, 10 years older than me. Here's her family. She was Rangers daft when she was a kid. When she was still in her teens, I was kind of growing up and starting to take an interest in the football. And I would go into her room at my gran's, and it used to be plastered with Rangers stuff and that. Her and her husband to be took me to my first Rangers game in 1977. And one of the things that got passed down to me was he's playing for Rangers annuals, and you'd flick through them without even knowing. Before I could even read, I remember sitting in my bed looking at them when I was really young. Barely even primary school age, and loving the pictures of all the players. We see like pictures of Bobby Shearer and think, that's a captain. That man looks absolutely ferocious. I'm glad he was on our side. And you'd see pictures of Ronnie McKinnon, and you would just think, what an unbelievably handsome guy. Well, he's like a superstar, a young Elvis, if you like. And that's the legend already was him being part of that famous halfback line with John Gregg and Jim Baxter. And as a kid, I'm thinking, what's a halfback line? And it's a major feature of Ronnie McKinnon's career. He kind of breaks into the Rangers first team for the first time, 1960 into 61. And becomes established over the next couple of seasons. But he's played basically over 10 years, 11, 12 years at Rangers. It's a time where you have halfbacks who then become centre halves, and the wing backs are becoming midfielders, so to speak. You've gone from that system when he started, which is basically the pyramid system. You've got your two fullbacks are essentially playing like modern day centre backs, right in front of the goalkeeper. In front of them, you have the half-back line, which is a combination of defence and offence. We all know Jim Baxter wasn't renowned for his defensive capabilities, so they've got kind of mixed skills in there, and then in front of them you basically have five guys who can just attack all day. You're inside left, outside right, inside right, centre forwards, outside left. Basically two wingers and a striker going through the middle with two attackers in support. And that's a system that Ronnie McKinnon would be playing when I'm reading one of these, playing for Rangers annuals, and he's got a chapter in it. He's got a chapter in a couple of them. And this one's really poignant because he's written it, it's 1964, so he's written it before he's even in any Scotland caps. And he's talking about how that's his next ambition, to get cap for Scotland. And indeed he did, playing in the most famous, arguably, Scotland win of all time, when we beat the reigning world champions England at Wembley in 1967. Ronnie McKinnon is in that game. He plays in that game with John Gregg and Jim Baxter. And he says how when he's a kid, his biggest ambition was to play for Rangers, But the only other thing he wanted to do, and he wanted to do this first, was to play for Benburb, who he calls the Rangers of the juniors. And if you know Ibrox, if you know your geography with Rangers, just along kind of Shield Hall Road, it's Tinto Park, Benburb's ground. They've moved it. They've got a new one recently. I think the new Tinto Park is built on the old Tinto Park, which was next to the previous Tinto Park, which is now housing. But that's where Ronnie McKinnon broke through from the Govan Juveniles. Gets a few games for Benburb when he's just like 16, and he talks about how that thing happened. It still happens in the non-league scene in the juniors, as was these days, where the board just changes. They completely change the committee at the end of the season, and the new committee, the first thing it does is gets rid of all the young players. So that's him. He's sacked by Benburb, and he just is totally disconsolate. Doesn't want to play for anybody else. Vows he won't play for anybody else in the juniors, but Donny Pace Juniors basically batter down his mum and dad's door and almost take him hostage as far as he's concerned in this little chapter in playing for Rangers. Edited by Ken Gallagher. They're always edited by Ken Gallagher, aren't they? Who he's obviously Ken Gallagher's obviously taken interviews with all the players. They've kind of reviewed the previous season. He's put their interviews into the first person, and they become the chapters in the Playing for Rangers books. And he talks about how Donny Pace having a game one day at Renfrew. Now, at this point, for all his youth career, he's playing at inside left. He's playing up front, basically supporting the striker, in between the winger and the striker. He's got a silky left foot, and he goes to Donny Pace. Donny Pace go to Renfrew Juniors, and it's Western Park, the old Western Park, which was the home of Renfrew Juniors from 1912 up until 2015. I've been to their new ground, just like Benburb, they've got a new ground, but I feel really lucky now, having read this, that I was at the old one as well. I went there once just to kind of tick it off a list, one of my wee anorak lists. So I've been at the ground where Ronnie McKinnon became a defender. He actually talks about on the way to the ground that day, he was thinking, thank goodness I'm not playing a left half, because the inside right for Renfrew, he doesn't name the guy, but he's been watched by a lot of scouts for senior clubs apparently. This player was red hot. And he gets into the dressing room, and the manager says to him, our left half hasn't showed up, he's ill, you're playing left half, and throws the jersey. Would it be 4, 5? I don't even know what number it's 6. I don't know what number jersey it would be, but he throws him the left half jersey, and Ronnie McKinnon throws it back at the manager, says absolutely no way, but no, he goes out. He plays left half, and that's it. A legend is born. He slots into that role. And the only thing he's waiting for there is Rangers. He's still waiting for Rangers to come calling, and he gets so frustrated that he ends up agreeing to have a trial with Clyde. But before he can get to Shawfield, he gets the phone call from Rangers, and he goes in and starts playing for Donny Pace still at the weekend, but he's training 2 nights a week at Ibrox, and eventually makes his debut for Rangers reserves, and still at inside left. He actually is moved back to inside left when he's playing for Rangers. I don't know if he's told him that's his favourite position or whatever. And his first game is against Hibs reserves, and Rangers lose 6 or 7-0. They get absolutely tanked. the guy who was playing inside right for Rangers that day, that's his Ibrox career over. He never gets asked back. But Ronnie McKinnon gets moved back to left half, and away he goes. And he just goes on from strength to strength. And I think checking out my Rangers, the complete records, that's Robert McElroy, the Rangers historian, and Bob Ferrier. Their great book. A few of you will probably have that. It looks like he made his debut for the first team against the British Army in December 1960. These are the days where Rangers didn't just give the troops some tickets, some complimentaries for a game. They'd actually give them a game. We'd play them at Ibrox, and it's obviously a kind of fixture where Rangers can try out some of their youth players. And Ronnie McKinnon comes in there, just about 20 years old by that point. He's born in 1940, a Govan boy. He's born in Govan. His mum's from Stornoway, which makes it so poignant that that's where he's actually passed away at the weekend, because the Lewis and Harris True Blues, the Lewis and Harris Ronnie McKinnon Rangers Supporters Club, the supporters club's named after him. His mum's from Stornoway, and he was over there for I do a night in his honour on Friday, and he's still been in Stornoway when he's passed away on Sunday. Unbelievably poignant, but I hope that can at least give his family some consolation that the man goes out just having been reminded just how much he means to the entire Rangers support. And I think he went to Stornoway as an evacuee basically during the war, during the Second World War, because he's born just a year into the Second World War, so he's close ties with the place. But he's a Govan boy, as far as he's concerned, and he's played for the two teams that he really wants to play for. The two best known teams in Govan. And he has this game in 1960 against the British Army, and then into 1961, like March 61, Rangers are on their way to winning the league, and it's him and Doug Bailey. A few of you might remember Doug Bailey. He's been a journalist with, I think, a football reporter with the Sunday Post anyway, perhaps the Sunday Mail too. I'm not 100%, I can't remember correctly. His son Lex Bailey ended up playing for Celtic at centre half against Rangers. I think he broke Chris Wood's ribs in a game that I was at Parkhead back in the late 80s. And him and Doug Bailey are the kind of reserve defending. I don't know what the position will be. I'm trying to work it out because this is a time, as I say, that it's changing from the two fullbacks and the half-back line. But they're kind of centre-half type players, and it's Harold Davis and Bill Patterson, the established centre-halves. The two of them don't appear. They're obviously injured for a couple of games. It's against Hearts and against Clyde, both at Ibrox, successive league games in 1961. Rangers win both of them, and Doug Bailey and Ronnie McKinnon play in those games. And that's him. I think he also plays against Clyde in the Glasgow Merchants Charity Cup, another famous tournament that ended up becoming less prestigious as time went on, but it was a chance for Rangers to blood youngsters. And he gradually makes his way into the first team, and by the time he actually has that injury in Lisbon, he's part of Rangers' only European trophy. He's part of the only campaign in which we actually win a European trophy in our history to date. And his 1960-61 season, he's breaking into the first team. We reach our first European final against Fiorentina, home and away, the first ever Cup Winners' Cup final. He's not part of that European squad, but he's in there at Ibrox at that time. And then, of course, he plays against Bayern Munich in Bayern, in Bavaria, in Nuremberg, practically a home game for Bayern Munich when we play them in the 1967 Cup Winners' Cup final. He's in there in that game where Bayern, despite having like Beckenbauer, Gerd Müller, Sepp Maier, Franz Roth, they beat us. They only beat us 1-0, and after extra time too, and we're playing with a centre forward up front. And it's a thing for me. I think the main thing that hits me with Ronnie McKinnon's passing, personally really honoured to be involved in writing a book about the Barcelona Bears, which was co-written myself and Ronnie Esplin, and Ronnie really pushed this book. It was his idea, and I just all remember being in the car with him, and he says to me, "Do you know anything, for me, the 72 Cup Winners' Cup team, it's not appreciated enough. It's not revered the way it should be. It doesn't get the praise it's due." You think of Aberdeen, the way Ronnie put this to me was, Aberdeen's 83 Cup Winners' Cup winning team is the greatest Aberdeen team of all time. That's it. They're just gods up at Pittodrie. Same with the Lisbon Lions for Celtic. Why is it that Rangers, the 72 Cup Winners' Cup team, and this is like 21 years ago, we get round to writing this book. And at that point in time, I don't even know if the nickname Barcelona Bears had been coined yet. I'm so happy that it ends up, there's a film made, you've seen it, Rangers 72 on Amazon Prime. I've only watched it every 2 minutes for obvious reasons since it was released last year, but it was brought out to honour the 50th anniversary of our only European trophy winning team, and it was great to see these guys, as far as I'm concerned, finally getting the actual praise they were due. And at the time Ronnie and I were writing the book back in 2002 for coming up for the 30th anniversary, we felt as if there was a few factors that we wanted to explore in the book that led to this strange way this team was regarded. I think the primary one is we felt as if we're going to win the European Cup one day. We still have to be aiming for the European Cup, and to properly give these guys the adulation, to adore them the way they actually deserve, would almost be a kind of abdication of duty. That meant we were going to go and try and win the Champions League or European Cup, which we nearly did. In the kind of 21st anniversary, it would have been of Barcelona in 92-93, when we were a goal away from the Champions League final. The thing for me with Ronnie McKinnon's career is it sums up that we were kind of down on ourselves. And I think that obviously the Ibrox disaster had happened just over a year before the final in Barcelona in 72, so there's still a sense of mourning around the club. And then the riot, the battle that took place on the pitch in the Nou Camp after the final whistle, Rangers not being allowed to do a lap of honour with the trophy. It was Willie Waddle, who, if I think about it, probably is my all-time. Despite, again, when I was starting to watch Rangers, Willie Waddle was a director. I didn't know a lot about him. He was a man very much in the background in my early days growing up supporting Rangers. But as I get more and more obsessed with the fact that the Rangers I was watching couldn't reach a European finals, I wasn't even 3 yet when we actually lifted the Cup Winners' Cup in 72, and it became a real fixation of mine as I was growing up. And I'm basically nearly 40. I'm in my late 30s by the time Rangers get to Manchester. It's a hell of a journey, and I don't just mean the one down the M74 and the M6. It was a hell of a journey to get there. And when I was reading, because I was so obsessed with just seeing Rangers in a European final, reading about Willie Waddle, he was hard. Like, he's my hero. He just became like my all-time hero. I think he's one of the most important, if not the most important figures in Rangers history. And what he did with the club after the Ibrox disaster, and then getting us our only European trophies, a massive part of it, and then rebuilding the stadium as well. But he was harder than anybody else on the fans. When we'd look back, and Ronnie and I writing the book and talking to supporters who were at the final, and just watching footage, it's obvious that basically the Guardia Civil, the kind of fascist police, Franco's police, there was a fascist in charge in Spain at the time. Not he's a bit of a fascist, as we think with various maybe Tory ministers or various prime ministers in Britain, an actual declared proto-fascist in charge. The same as it had been 5 years earlier when Celtic won the European Cup in Lisbon. Their guys, they invade the pitch at the end, quite rightly, momentous moment, and the Portuguese police just decide to lay off. They let them get on with it. And Barcelona, Catalonia, famously a separatist kind of minded republic, didn't like Franco in any way whatsoever. Maybe the Guardia Civil felt they had to do a little bit more over there, but they laid into us, and our fans retaliated. They weren't for taking it, and on it went. But I feel as if we went down on ourselves, but that became a part of why we didn't properly revere the Cup Winners' Cup win. It's that Rangers thing, which I think is a really laudable thing. One of the things I actually love most about being a Rangers supporter, we don't blame anybody else, we take blame on board. And I think Ronnie McKinnon perhaps suffered from that as well. When I'm talking about my auntie and her having posters in her room and that, so when she moves in with my uncle or whatever, when she moves away from childish things, I steal all her posters and her pennants and I start putting them up on my wall. And I've got pictures of guys that I never saw playing up on my wall when I'm a kid in my bedroom, and Ronnie McKinnon's one of them. And I just always had that feeling that he's most revered and properly revered as being part of that famous half-back line of the team that most famously in the early 60s won the treble. They won the domestic treble. They were beaten 6-0 by Real Madrid that season, and he talks about it. He talks about it in this book here. He talks about the fact that they had quite a young team out that night and nobody should be too hard on them. They lost 6-0 in the Bernabeu in the European Cup to Real Madrid, but that treble winning team, everybody knows that the entire lineup of that team, any proper Rangers fan, and it's that's what they're lauded for, winning the Scottish treble. And I see it this season as well. We got to a European final in Seville. We're back in Spain on the 50th anniversary practically of us winning the Cup Winners' Cup, and fans are kind of like, oh, it was rubbish that we didn't win it. There's no kind of enjoyment of what it took us to get there. We're straight onto this general feeling of, right, we've done Europe, that's fine, we've messed about long enough, let's get back to winning things domestically. And it's really weird. It's a really strange phenomenon with the Rangers support. I don't think we laud ourselves enough and give ourselves the praise. Alec McDonald's, wee Doddy who scored against Rennes and scored against Torino in that run to Barcelona and played in the final himself. He says in that video, that Barcelona 72 video, I don't want to be a member of the last Rangers team to win a European trophy. You want other guys to go and do it as well. They'll always be the first. Nobody can ever take that away from them. And Ronnie McKinnon, he played in the first two games, home and away against Rennes, who were the cup holders from France. And he plays the first leg against Sporting, and in the 46th minute of the second leg, that crazy night where the referee, Lawrence van Ravens, the Dutch referee, forgets all about the away goals rule and makes the players play a penalty shootout. There's no need for it, even though Rangers lose the penalty shootout. We were already through on away goals, having lost 4-3 over in Lisbon and winning 3-2 at Ibrox. But in the 46th minute of that game, the Sporting player just jumps on Ronnie McKinnon's leg, breaks it in two places, and Alec McDonald in that Barcelona 72 video, that Rangers 72 video, just talks about how Ronnie McKinnon's basically sitting there saying, excuse me, I think I've broken my leg. Just cool as you like. Unbelievably cool customer. And that was him. He couldn't get back into the Rangers team after that. The injury wasn't, I don't think it was properly treated. They didn't have the technology in those days to get him back to full fitness. And he went and he played, I think a year or so later, he went and played for a season in South Africa. He played for a wee while in South African football, and I think he went to Australia as well. Really enjoyed his life, a full life, hopefully. But even when I'm looking back at his career, there's a tour. Rangers went on a tour of the Soviet Union around 1961. 61 or 62, excuse me if I've got that wrong, but you're thinking European football club competition as we currently know it had only started in the 1950s, the mid-50s, and there's Ronnie McKinnon as part of this Rangers team that goes to the Soviet Union when everybody who's watching football at that time can remember, obviously before European competition, still a new thing, when the way you raised the profile of the club was to go on prestigious tours. Rangers would go to the States, they'd go to Canada, etc., go to Europe, and here they were going behind the Iron Curtain, Soviet Union. You know, we had that Moscow Dynamo coming to Ibrox in 1945 as part of their tour of Britain, and there's like basically 100,000 at Ibrox for a game in an afternoon. The 2 each draw, and it's made it so amazing that that's who we met in the final in 72 as well. But Rangers go to the Soviet Union in the early 60s, and they basically they play in Tbilisi, so that's Georgia, and the Republic of Georgia then, but Georgia basically. They play in Kiev, the Ukraine, and they play Lokomotiv Moscow, I think it is, and Moscow beat them. And they win 2 of the games, draw 1, and they come back, and it's Abbotsford Airport as it was then. There's a massive crowd. Rangers fans charge the runway to laud these Rangers players as they're coming off the plane. It was there's things that have happened at Rangers, and I think there's things that have happened in the last 10 years at Rangers that mean the world to us at the time, but are so quickly forgotten. So for me, even though I never saw Ronnie McKinnon playing, it's really important to remember things like that, and also the fact that the season after that, doing in the Bernabeu, it's one of the greatest Rangers teams of all time, and say 63-64 treble winning team, going into the following season into European Cup, and Jim Baxter breaks his leg in the Prater Stadium against Rapid Vienna after easing a great performance against them that put us in the quarter-finals. And it's maintained by a lot of Rangers fans that had Baxter not had his leg broken in that game, we could have won the European Cup, become the first British team to win European Cup 2 years before Celtic managed it. 2 years before. It's at a time where Jockstein's just about to arrive at Celtic and transform them, but the feeling is we could have got there first had it not been for that leg break, just like had it not been for not playing with a centre forward in Munich, in Nuremberg against Bayern Munich, the 67 Cup Winners' Cup final, because we'd get rid of 2 of the greatest strikers in the history of Rangers because we lost 1 game at Berwick. We lost an embarrassing game at Berwick. I think of being too hard on ourselves, and then we lose the Europa League final, more than 50 years later because we don't have it. All our strikers are unfit. And we've got Joe Aribo, we've got a midfielder playing up front, and we still managed to take the thing to penalties, and we're the guy who scored so many goals for us on the way to that final, one of the probably the greatest, most enjoyable European run of my entire life, he's still being slaughtered by the Rangers supporters. He's still slagging. He's not a captain. He's not good enough, James Tavernier, So we're so hard on ourselves at times that we don't do ourselves any favours and I mean, it's not just the supporters, but the directors and what have you. And Ronnie McKinnon, that run to the quarterfinals of the 64-65 European Cup, where we lost just by the 1 goal to Inter of Milan, who would go on to win the trophy that season. We don't get there if it's not for the first round against Red Star Belgrade. We beat them 3-1 at Ibrox in the second leg. We are 4-1 down, and we're going out until late on in the game. Up pops Ronnie McKinnon to level the tie. We go to a playoff at Highbury. This was the days before the away goals rule had come in. So you go to the playoff at Highbury, not the only one Rangers played in, but that's how super glamorous is that, going to Arsenal's beautiful old ground for a European playoff against Red Star Belgrade. Beat them 3-1, and on we went to get into the quarterfinals, losing narrowly, and establishing that side is probably I think a side that people regarded as greater than the side that won the Cup Winners' Cup in 72, because the 71-72 season as well, domestically we were absolutely terrible. We'd lost 3 times to Celtic before the kind of middle of September because of the old League Cup sectionals, and also you play Celtic home and away in the League Cup sections. The groups that used to start the season, you'd play your League Cup group before the league started. You play that in August. Celtic are rebuilding the Parkhead main stand at that point in time, so they ask if they can play their home game at Ibrox. So we play Celtic 3 times at Ibrox, twice in the League Cup, once in the league. There's like 75, 80, 85,000 at all these games, and Rangers lose a lot of them. They've been beaten 3 times by Celtic before it's even September, and this is the only Rangers season to ever end with a European trophy. So Michael Beale, as bad as things might seem at the start of this season, that they've been a lot worse and ended up finishing a lot better. We could put out the Scottish Cup at the semi-finals, finished 3rd in the league, well off the pace, and we lose the other league game. This is the time you only play 2 league games against everybody. We only played everybody home and away in the old First Division, but we lost the other league game against Celtic at Parkhead. So Celtic beat us 4 times that season. We get put out of the Scottish Cup at the semi-final stage, something that didn't happen again for, I think, 40 odd years. And that's domestically, it's absolutely awful, but we end up winning the only European trophy in our history, and Ronnie McKinnon, he played his part in that. And as I say, Ronnie Esplin and I, lucky enough to do this wee book, and that's what I end with a wee bit. It's actually written by Colin Jackson. It's like Ronnie Esplin interviewed Colin Jackson, who, another centre half that we've lost, and he ends up getting injured, having played all the games and played so well to get us to the final in Barcelona. He ends up getting himself injured before the final itself. I think it's a couple of days, just training for a couple of days before the final, maybe even the eve of the final, and he puts his kind of foot in a divot, and that is it. He can't do it. And so Ronnie Esplin interviewed him when we wrote this book like 20 odd years ago, and Colin Jackson says, on the day of the match, I was with Ronnie McKinnon and the rest of the boys were going up at 1 o'clock in the afternoon for a rest. Ronnie said, why don't we get a jug of sangria? So we drank that and then went up to the room at about 2 o'clock. Ronnie then got out the cigars and produced a bottle of Harvey's Bristol Cream in a big dark blue bottle. Then the old masseur, Tom Patterson, knocked on the door to see if we were okay. He disappeared again and come back with a bottle of gin. Tam had a couple of drinks and then left Ronnie and I to it. Big Jock, that's his Jock Wallace, knows that assistant to Willie Waddle at the time. Big Jock came into the room at about 4:30 just before the pre-match meal and had to fight his way through the smoking fumes. He grabbed me and threw me in the shower, calling me all the names under the sun. He's shouting, you stupid bastard, what if there's a replay? And I'm saying, don't worry, we'll beat them, we'll win it. He turned the shower on and I still had my clothes on. So I stood there getting drenched, but it sobered me up a bit. And this is Colin Jackson going on to talk about just how miserable he was, knowing that he should have been playing in that final, but doesn't want to put his teammates in a downer either. But he goes and sits in the main stand, and Jock Wallace comes up and grabs him and drags him down into the dressing room for the team talk, just to make him feel a part of things. And Ronnie McKinnon would already have long resigned himself to that, having got his basically career-ending injury in November against Sporting. But Colin Jackson ends by saying, but there were 13 medals, and Big Ronnie and I got the other 2, so they can't take that away from me. And they certainly can't. They can't take that away from Colin Jackson or Ronnie McKinnon. Neither can they take away the fact that he scored for Scotland in 67 after they'd beaten the world champions, beat the reigning world champions at Wembley, the very pitch where England had won the World Cup just months beforehand. And the team that England fielded in that final against West Germany, they only changed one player for that match against Scotland. If you read Michael McEwen's book Gallus, I did a review for that. It's on Gersnet, on the Gersnet website just last week. It just came out this month. An entire book about that Scotland team that beat England at Wembley that day. England only changed from the World Cup winning team, the World Cup final team, Roger Hunt for Jimmy Greaves, which is a bit like taking out Alex Oxlade-Chamberlain and putting in Harry Kane. It's a total upgrade, if anything. And England hadn't lost a game, obviously, since they'd won that World Cup in Scotland. But out there, Ronnie McKinnon at the heart of things to beat them 3-2 on the day. And later on that year, that was April, and they've still got European finals to play. And then later on that year, because the British Home Internationals were doubling as a European Championship qualifier, they're playing Wales at Hampden, so it's doubly important. And Wales are winning 2-1 in the second half. Alan Goseen gets an equaliser, but Ronnie McKinnon steps up with his only goal for his country to make it 3-2. So he certainly got his goals. He got his caps for Scotland. They crowned him with a goal, and being part of the most famous Scotland team of all time. And he's featured in 3 Rangers teams that I think are completely underappreciated for the fact that they got to 3 European finals. He's been in and about Ibrox at this point. And I just hope that he got some satisfaction, or his family at least got some sort of consolation from the fact that on Friday in Stornoway he got a sample of the praise he was due. And it's fitting that the next match to be played after the passing of Ronnie McKinnon will be against Real Betis, another green and white team from the Iberian Peninsula, and we'll all do a fantastic job, no doubt, of remembering him tomorrow night.